What is up, everybody, and welcome to my ranking of the Bad Boys franchise, of which, after this weekend, we now have 4 films. This is a series that I have been a fan of my entire life. I've seen every single movie in theaters. My dad took me to see the first 2. I had taken him to see the 3rd one, and hopefully we'll get a chance to take him to see the 4th one. But there are a set of movies where there's not a bad movie in the bunch. I don't even think there's a mediocre movie in the bunch. So this is one of those rankings where it's not necessarily ranking them from worst to best. It's ranking a set of good movies just based off of my personal preference. And as odd as it may seem for how specific and the certain type of appeal that these movies have, Bad Boys fans are very passionate about which ones are best and worst. So let me know all of your thoughts on these 4 films down in the comment section below. Coming in at number 4 for me is going to be the newest film, Bad Boys Ride or Die. Now, check what I just said. I like every single one of these films. I did give this a good review. I gave it 3.75 out of 5. So that just shows you how much I like the other 3 movies that we have yet to talk about. Now, Bad Boys Ride or Die, I was very excited for. Coming off of the previous film, Bad Boys for Life, which you'll see higher on this list, I was very excited for the rejuvenated life that this franchise seemed to have. And the only real hiccup, the only real worry that I had was whether or not the world, or whether or not your average moviegoer is ready to go see Will Smith on screen again. It's always hard to tell whether online controversy actually represents real life controversy with the Oscars slap and everything. And after this first weekend, it seems everybody's ready for more Will Smith. So that worry was gone. And Bad Boys Ride or Die basically took everything that they did in Bad Boys for Life and doubled down on it. The style of humor, the type of humor, the action sequences, the very creative camera work that these 2 directors, which I always script their names, so I'm not going to bother trying to say it, but the directors of both of these last 2 Bad Boys films, as well as the ill-fated Batgirl film, they have a very promising career. We'll just say that. They're very, very good at taking on the mantle of what Michael Bay left and making this franchise fit those first 2 films while very much making them stylistically their own. And the biggest way is through the action. The action's great in this movie. There's plenty of action. I really liked the first-person shooter camera, which we saw behind the scenes things where they had like a camera on a swivel dolly that was attached to the actors. Very cool stuff. I think that the more personal story that we go for here regarding the aftermath of Captain Matthews' death and Will Smith and or Mike Lowry, I guess I should say, and his very strained relationship with his newfound son, and how all that kind of plays into this corruption plot line. I thought it was good to finally, now that we're in these older age of these characters, to kind of do a more personal story, and they did a good job with that. The only thing that I didn't care for so much with this film that really held it back for me was the humor. Now, there is a lot of good humor in this movie. I did laugh at most of the jokes. I'd say 60% of the jokes actually worked really well for me, but 40% of the jokes either fell flat or were just flat out way too silly for me. I mean, there's a number of jokes regarding Martin Lawrence's character of Marcus, where he's got this addiction to candy and junk food, and also continuing on this like spiritual thing that they keep doing with him that I've honestly never really cared for, where he's had this really stylistically, at least visually, this like premonition or this vision from God or vision from beyond the grave that they have in the first act, and how he's carrying that through the rest of the film. I don't know, just a lot of the humor regarding his character specifically, mostly in the first act, I just thought was really borderline stupid. So humor-wise, I think this is the weakest of the 4 films for me. But overall, I did enjoy it. I do think that it is a movie that most Bad Boys fans will enjoy. But for my money, at least on the one watch that I've had with it so far, it's my least favorite of the 4. And while I actually neglected for some reason to mention this in my full review, there's also a bit of an over-reliance on recurring jokes in this film. Both jokes that are started in the first act and keep recurring throughout the film, but also jokes that have been kind of franchise staples that for me are beginning to get really stale at this point, like them needlessly singing the Bad Boys song in random times. Having certain jokes that go all the way back to Bad Boys 1 and Bad Boys 2 that are brought back here, which I don't want to spoil, but I don't know. There's some of them that just kind of feel like we've done this. We've done this joke. We've done this plot line. We've done this payoff before. It was better then. Now it kind of feels like almost like you're running out of material a little bit. So that was another thing. Most of my issues were regarding the humor. Didn't like the villains too much either, but there's never really been massively standout villains in this franchise. The stars are the protagonists. So all that being said, I really enjoyed this film. It sounds like I'm more negative on it, but it is a really good time. It is a fun movie for Bad Boys fans, and if you are a fan of this franchise, I think most of you will at least enjoy this, but it is my least favorite of the four. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Bad Boys 2, and this might be the hot take of the video because this seems to be the fan favorite. This seems to be the most popular pick for best Bad Boys film, and I love it. I've always loved it. This is a movie that takes everything that they did in the first Bad Boys, and you know, the career of Will Smith as well as the career of Michael Bay had grown exponentially since that first Bad Boys film, and Bad Boys 2 absolutely reflects that. It is a bigger, meatier, more over-the-top, ridiculous, insane, gore-filled sequel. I mean, if Bad Boys is like down here on the scale, Bad Boys 2 is like through the fucking ceiling. The action scenes are more plentiful, they're bigger, they're much more choreographed. I mean, you've got like the highway chase where they're launching cars off of the carrier. The gore is exponentially bigger in this one, like literally exploding bodies and you know, chainsawed limbs set on a table and stuff like that. The jokes are much bigger and much more mile a minute, most of which really work for me. This is, you know, a solid argument for the funniest of the franchise. And I do like the storyline going on where Mike is secretly dating Marcus's sister, but Marcus hasn't found out about it and he's kind of a little bit unstable about it. So there's a lot of really good things in this film that makes it an understandable pick for fan favorite. For me, it's always been just a little too much. Now, I say that as somebody who loves the film, so I'm just trying to justify why it's at number 3. It is a movie that even now 4 films in, it is still significantly bigger than what we got in part 3 and part 4. It is the biggest that Bad Boys will probably ever be. And for some people, that's a good thing. For me, it's enjoyable as hell, but it's always made it a little bit bloated. You know, it's always been a little bit overindulgent, maybe, in some of the Michael Bay-isms and stuff like that. So for a movie that I love, that's the reason why it's at number 3. Coming in at number 2 is going to be the original Bad Boys for me. Now, this has always been one of my favorites. This is kind of the, not really the black sheep, but kind of more the easily overlooked installment of this franchise because it is so much smaller in scale and so much simpler than where the franchise has gone from Bad Boys 2 onward. I feel like many people just kind of relegate it to number 1. And for me, I've always really enjoyed and kind of looked forward, if I'm going to rewatch these films, look forward to the simplicity of this first film. I think that the humor in this one is arguably the best of the franchise, which, again, is a solid argument for the top 3 here. I mean, these are funny-ass movies.
Now that's how you're supposed to drive. From now on, that's how you drive.
The whole consistent humor regarding the Julie character and the, you know, husband-wife drama between Marcus and Teresa, and Mike Lowry being the playboy and them having to play each other and kind of live each other's lives to a certain degree. I always just get a lot of good laughs out of that. Maybe it's just because I'm a family man, I just relate to that humor more, but I always get the biggest laughs out of this movie, I feel, whenever I rewatch this franchise. The action is still solid. I mean, for the more small-scale buddy cop, Michael Bay, like directorial debut that this is, it pales into comparison to the scale and the size and the over-the-top nature of the other films, but it's still very solid as far as an action buddy cop comedy. I think that the whole plot line going on about them having to protect Julie while trying to figure out the identity of Max's killer, who is also the people that stole all these drugs, it's just a really solid, simple idea. And I also think there's a bit of magic in this film in the fact that they didn't really have a script ready. This was something that I think originally it was supposed to be John Lovitz and Dan Aykroyd or something crazy like that, and they just kind of had the concept, and then eventually Martin Lawrence got attached to it, and he called Will Smith up and said, hey, we're the 2 biggest African-American TV stars. We need to do this movie to like just prove to the world that we can kick ass and dominate the box office, something to that degree. And you know, he was right. And so they went into this film with a skeleton of a script, and most of the best scenes of the film is just Will Smith and Martin Lawrence going off the cuff, just ad-libbing, just kind of having fun in the moment. The whole give me a pack of tropical fruit bubblicious and some Skittles, like that's an ad-libbed moment. So there's something about the rhythm of this film that I've just always appreciated, and so it maintains one of my favorites of this franchise. But coming in at number 1 for me, which still is a surprise, is Bad Boys for Life. Now, this is a sequel that was a long delayed thing. I remember when it was coming out, it was like, oh, is this gonna be any good? Like any even somewhat comedy sequel that takes more than 10 years to gestate, it just kind of feels like this is gonna suck. This is gonna be them just baiting for nostalgia, and this is not gonna work, and it's gonna leave a stain on the franchise. And, for circumstances that were beyond the control of the movie theater industry, this ended up being the top grossing film of 2020. So it's got that moniker to put on its shelf. But Bad Boys for Life was just a huge surprise. I mean, having 2 directors come in that were not Michael Bay, that were not really all that established, and having, Martin Lawrence, his comedy or his acting career wasn't necessarily at its peak at that time. He hadn't been doing a whole lot. Will Smith certainly felt like he was kind of on his somewhat of a downward trajectory. He wasn't, the king of the box office anymore. So it was nothing but doubt to reasonably have for this film. And it's one of the funniest movies in the franchise.
Oh, look at that. Damn. Oh, that is some Elephant Man shit right there.
The action is solid as hell, not as bombastic as Bad Boys 2, but, still very over the top and exciting and creatively shot. And there's a really good storyline in here, which is, again, just like with Part 4, is a very personal story for Mike Lowrey, where he's got these assassins that seemingly are targeting him and everybody around him, and then the discovery that the assassin is actually his son. Also exploring a very mature divide that Marcus and Mike have, where Marcus, as the family man, is ready to hang up the gun, is ready to retire, is ready to, put away being a bad boy for the sake of his family and, his soul, I guess. And Mike Lowrey being a guy that never really wants to calm down, never really wants to settle down, but also now has this new drive of revenge, and that kind of putting a bit of a wedge between them. That is a storyline that I really enjoyed, much more than the attempts at kind of aging these 2 characters that they made in the 4th film. And by the end of it, it's just a really fun, exciting, and mature movie for the Bad Boys franchise. So at the end of the day, after rewatching all these movies over the last week, I still think overall this is the best film in the franchise for my money. So Bad Boys for Life comes in at number 1. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoy the Bad Boys franchise, let me know your ranking down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, check over here for my 2024 new release reviews so far. And I'm also going to put a 31 on 31 action edition up here, which is a ranking me and some friends did that included the previous 3 Bad Boys films a couple of years ago. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.